Today on Locked On Rockies, we've been kind of negative around here of late, but there are some areas to be excited about for the Colorado Rockies in 2024. Let's talk about that. And I ask, would you rather see great pitching or great offense in 2024 for the Rockies?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the third day of January in the year 2024. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, your Rockies fan extraordinaire. Been following this team my entire life and been bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network for over 3 seasons now. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and also available on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel where you can be part of the show and help the show out with your subscriptions, your comments, your likes, all that good stuff, all helps the show. Really, really do appreciate you folks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Today on Locked On Rockies, we're going to talk about positive storylines for the Colorado Rockies as we've been a little heated of late. We've been critical, understandably so, necessarily so, for in the case of the Colorado Rockies. But let's talk about some areas where the Rockies actually have some great potential. And one key area, I think, and we've talked a little bit about it before, but when it comes to what I think is going to be one of the most impressive, or hopefully the thing that has the most potential for the Colorado Rockies, we'll talk about that coming up here, as well as asking next year. I'm focused on next year in 2024. Is it more important for you as a Rockies fan to see good pitching or good offense? And a quick note there from Purple Row, on a really good take on the Helton Hall of Fame process that I really like. So we'll dive into that as well. Hey, also, you got a little bit of time left here to get your questions in ahead of our recording with Locked On MLB Prospects. If you got questions about the farm system, make sure that you ask here on X or in the comments below of this video. Okay, Rockies talk. Lots to get to dive into, at least on my brain today. Before we dive into everything, however, got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets when you place a $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 at FanDuel.com/locked on. All right, so here's the deal. We've been negative. We've been realistic. We've been honest about the Colorado Rockies. We've talked about stuff we're worried about. We've talked about our concerns. I want to highlight some things that I think the Rockies are going to do well next year. And one area in particular, and it's one that I've really harped as being one of the most important parts of the new era of baseball. One area I think we're going to look and see improvement from the Rockies in next year is going to be stolen bases. It's really exciting to me that there are 3 20-base stealers, 3 players who can steal 20 bases on the Rockies right now. Mixed in with the fact that maybe they might, who knows if they can get a little more aggressive with some of these other young guys and see what they do. But the Rockies were a team that didn't steal a lot of bases. One of the lowest teams in baseball, only 3 people with double-digit steals on the season, and the rest with leading with 5. And surprisingly enough, Charlie Blackmon having 4. So there were multiple Rockies who didn't steal a base, multiple Rockies with only 1 stolen base. Steals and aren't something the Rockies do a lot. But now I think that mentality changes. When you're going into the spring as the Colorado Rockies this year, you're now going in with the mindset and the philosophy of, we have Nolan Jones, Brenton Doyle, and Ezequiel Tovar. Let's make them more aggressive on the bases. Now, those are the 3 players with double digits. The most bases stolen go to Brenton Doyle at 22, Nolan Jones at 20, and Ezequiel Tovar at 11. So when you're going into the spring now, that has to be a complete added factor into the approach of what you want to do. And I think would add a lot of a nice layer of depth and threat to this lineup. And when I say depth, I mean depth of ways the Rockies can score. There's been so many times where it feels like the Rockies are so station to station, so stuck and so dominated by their strikeouts that this team really can't generate offense that much and doesn't generate a ton of offense and wasn't much of an offensive force next year. Now base hits can be threatened by turning into doubles or triples with the speed of these players. And if players are able to get on base via the walk or singles, now the Rockies have 3 base stealing threats. That's a third of the lineup that the opposition is going to have to consider when it comes to base stealing. And I'm hoping the Rockies are able to get decent base running and base stealing from the other guys too, even though I don't think speed is necessarily the strength of a lot of the players on the Rockies. They're not necessarily a very fast team as a whole, but they have fast players. And if the Rockies are better at stealing bases, I think that just shows also a more creative approach to offense, a different philosophy, using the players and all of their skills that they bring to you. If the Rockies don't steal bases and don't utilize the speed of Doyle, Jones, and Tovar, they are missing out on a whole area, on a whole facet of their offense and on of their impact. If they're not going to use that, they're going to fall further behind. However, I think we're going to see all of these. Nolan Jones is going to flirt, with the playing time and everything, and the changes that are hopefully staying healthy. I don't think it's crazy that Nolan Jones finishes the year with 25 stolen bases. With Brenton Doyle immediately stealing 22 bags in 400 appearances, in 400 plate appearances, or ABs, I should say. I know those aren't the same, but you know what I'm saying. In a small sample amount of time. I don't think it's that crazy to think that he's someone that could flirt with, can he go 25 plus? Can the Rockies get enough out of him to take advantage of his speed and his ability to make good jumps and get to a 25? Could he go to 30? I mean, 30 stolen bases would be monumental for a player for the Rockies. I mean, I can't even think of that ever. Let's see. Most stolen bases in a season by a Colorado Rockies player. 68. Willie Taveras with 68 stolen bases in 2008. And I mean, it's hard to imagine the Rockies getting even close to that. But just to add this threat, I think is one thing that's going to make the Rockies using their speed and being able to be more aggressive on the base pass will make for a better offense. And because of that speed threat, I think the Rockies offense does have the potential to take steps forward and be more entertaining and more engaging. Another thing's some other small that's my big area that I think that will be a positive increase for the Rockies this year. And you might just be sitting there, it's just stolen bases. It's a base running. No, it really, really adds and builds a level of depth. I keep saying depth. It adds, layer is the better way to say that. It adds another element to the offense. And clearly, as other teams shown, look at the Diamondbacks, for a prime NL West example, have shown that base stealing and base running aggression can really jumpstart offenses. And if you're looking to boat race someone out of Coors Field, what better way to do it than being able to get, if these guys can get on base and then immediately putting pressure on opposing pitchers by putting themselves in scoring positions. This increase in, I think, abilities and hopefully aggressiveness on the base paths are going to make the Rockies a better offense. I think that this team does have, I think this team is going to also be incredible defensively. I think potentially this team is going to be overlooked when it comes to their defense because of how most likely the season will go when it comes to wins and losses. But the Rockies infield is going to be incredibly entertaining when it comes to infield defense with McMahon, Rogers, Tovar, and Tovar. I mean, that is gold all over, or Gold Glove potential all over the place. So with that, those type of things and that embrace of base stealing mixed with that defense, if the base stealing can give your offense that slight edge and it's backed up by the high caliber potential of this defense, the Rockies are going to steal some games. I do really firmly believe that. I think that there are a lot of players that took last year on the chin that are looking at the perception of them and the perception of the Rockies, and they want to change it. I really hope that the Rockies are able to avoid the overworked bullpen, because I think one thing we'd look back on is we'd be really impressed with this roster. We'd be really impressed with the guys on this team if the Rockies went through that stretch in the second half of the season where they were losing games in the 8th inning like every night, it felt like, or bullpen was the bullpen meltdown in the second half. We'd be sitting here and saying, wow, the Rockies win up against playoff teams in the second half of the season, in the thick of playoff races, and they played very well and went toe-to-toe with some of the best in the league. So the potential is still there. But I think the two big areas that are going to be great successes or have potential for great success for the Rockies in 2024, base stealing, base running, and the defense overall. My question, though, for you as Rockies fans is in 2024, I know big picture, the focus is always pitching, but I'm curious, as a Rockies fan, when you're tuning in next year, are you going to be more encouraged by the Rockies having strong pitching or better offense? And I'll get to my answer here coming up in segment number 2. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about some of the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes FanDuel. The NFL season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Yes, unfortunately, our beloved Broncos not making it to the postseason, but FanDuel's got you covered with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. You can do that on money lines. You can do that on over-unders. You can do that on the Broncos. You could do it on the Avalanche. You could do it on the Denver Nuggets. You could bet on the college football playoff. All the betting action available to you at FanDuel.com/lockedon for that bonus bet offer. $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, for new customers. The app is super easy to use, and there are many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. There's the new Explore tab loaded with bets. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub for the best way to find popular parlays, and lots more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup, a field goal. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. That was a tough little stretch there. And we're coming to you on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show by subscribing, letting me know your thoughts in the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section, whatever's on your mind when it comes to the Rockies. Hey, if you're on YouTube and you need more sports coverage, Locked On's got you covered there too, because they got the first 24/7 national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel for sports. All right. We are, of course, the Locked On Rockies podcast. Thank you so much. Free first listen, all that good stuff. So I asked this question, and it's a basic one, and it's a big picture one, but I want you to actually sit here and consider it, and consider the impacts, consider the longevity, consider what future it shapes for the Rockies. And it's the question of, would you rather see great offense or great pitching this year? It says defense on the overlay. I'm honestly, like I said in the first segment, pretty confident in the defense. And I asked this question because you always hear, get the pitching. What are we doing about the pitching? Who's going to pitch? Can they pitch? Will they pitch? Who's going to fill the rotation? And those questions, very valid, especially right now. Remember, $0 spent by the Colorado Rockies in free agency right now as they're facing a depleted starting rotation. But next year, I think it's more important for the Rockies to be better on offense. I really do. I think that the Rockies foundation, one of their things that even though they suffer the identity crises that we've talked about, at its core, people believe that Colorado is a good offensive team. Why? Well, that's because of where they play. It's because of where their history and yada, yada, yada. It's much more important for the Rockies in 2024 to improve upon their offense. The offense is going to be the reason why the Rockies fight back in games. The offense is going to be the reason why Coors Field is a difficult place for opposing teams to come and play. Right now, I have bigger concerns with the offense overall, because there's a lot of players that we have to see what their deal is in terms of offense as they develop, and they're young, mixed with the fact that there's a pretty mixed bag of veteran offensive players on the Colorado Rockies. I'm really, as much as we know how much he's important, I can't sit here and say I am going to be all that impressed with another lackluster Ryan McMahon offensive season. I think the inconsistencies of Ryan McMahon's offense are a bigger deal than the current state of Kyle Freeland. And I say that because we know Kyle Freeland has done his job enough. And the home run tick-up concerns and the lack of velocity are, of course, issues with Kyle Freeland. But we also kind of know the Kyle Freeland. We know who that is. We're still trying to properly evaluate and understand Ryan McMahon. The streakiness. And I say that because it's that consistency. Kyle Freeland, we kind of know who you're pretty positive that Kyle Freeland, more often than not, is going to go 6 innings, probably going to be around 3 to 4 runs, maybe. Home run, definitely a possibility, but someone that's going to keep you in the game. Ryan McMahon, when it comes to offense, is a guy that's going to go down on 3 strikes when the bases are loaded in a critical situation for the Rockies. And he's also the guy that's going to hit 420-foot bombs in crucial moments for the Rockies. I need to see more from Ryan McMahon's offense than I need to see from any pitcher in the Rockies rotation right now, because there's younger guys in the Rockies rotation that could benefit from a little bit more time and have honestly just been going through the grinder of being the back end of the Rockies rotations for about 3 seasons now, with the rotation of young guys that they've thrown in there. And the Quantrill trade, hey, if he's a bounce back guy, I mean, there's risk there. That's basically all kind of sitting there and saying there's tremendous upside there. And if he performs more to the norm, then, well, you look and you say that matches his stats. I care way more about the Rockies scoring more runs this year. I care way more about the Rockies hitting more home runs this year. I care more about the Rockies increasing their offensive numbers across the board than I do about the pitching rotation, because this offense is the bigger picture long term. You're going to have serious questions about this rotation. And in the second half of the season, we kind of are going to get the first look at I believe the front office's true vision for this current Rockies team. A rotation that has Marquez, Senzatella, Freeland, Gomber in it. And then you figure out the fifth. You got Cal Quantrill. You got your young guys. Who knows what you're going to do there. But they also are saying, I'm pretty positive in saying, these are the guys that we're sticking with. These are the guys of the future. And if they are, we need to see more from their offense, because plain and simple, the Rockies can't be at the bottom when it comes to offense. They have to be a middle of the road offense at least, because of that pitching. So now you're going to sit there and say, well, then that means the pitching's the bigger deal. The pitching is the biggest curse and the bane of the Rockies organization to its core, yes. But it also isn't so bad when the offense is able to back you up, when the offense wins in the shootouts, when the offense helps you win the close games on the days that your pitcher steps up. It's more infuriating for me watching the Colorado Rockies spoil a Chris Flexen or Chase Anderson start. I know Flexen's not coming back to the Rockies, but when those guys actually, because you have your expectations are very low about those pitchers, when they go out and they give you a chance on the road, at home, it doesn't matter, and then the offense consistently falls flat on its face, that's the bigger problem. Major league pitchers are good enough to even the most mediocre ones, or doesn't matter what your personal power rankings are. Most major league pitchers are capable of keeping you in ball games and giving you enough. It's a matter of them working in tandem with the offense. It's a confidence thing. It'd be a nice boost for Kyle Freeland. Instead of him getting out of a jam and the offense going 3 up, 3 down, score a run. Back him up after he gives up a home run. You answer back with hitting a home run yourself. We'll learn and know so much more about the capabilities, the promise, the potential of the 2025 Colorado Rockies, the 2026 Colorado Rockies, if this team develops more on offense. And if they don't, then we grow even more concerned with the future. Because the Rockies were eventually going to have to deal with the reckoning of this rotation that they've loved for so long. Because, when it comes, whether it be injuries, whether it become to, contracts ending, I mean, the Herman Marquez era in Colorado was extended, but it wasn't extended by that long. And those extensions on these other pitchers are going to run out eventually. And you're going to eventually have to come up and make an evaluation of the Peter Lamberts and those type of pitchers when they're healthy and go from there. I think the most important thing for the Rockies to get back on track and for the best sign for things that are showing improvement for the Rockies in 2024 will be with its offense. I will be okay if the Rockies have a good offense and then unfortunately gets blown up by a pitching staff that's not that great. Why? Because the team is scoring more, because the team is a bigger threat on offense. The Rockies have become painfully boring when it comes to an offensive team, and that's a bummer because they used to be really, really fun and really, really exciting. So I ask you, in 2024, would you rather see great offense or great pitching? And which one do you think is more important for the future of the Rockies? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are on that one. Hey, to close out the show, the Hall of Fame ballots are in. The tracking numbers for Todd Helton were looking worrisome, but pretty good. But regardless, I wanted to bring up a point that was made from Purple Row, from, let's see, Renee Descartes here on Purple Row. I just want to make sure I had the right name. And it's about voting for vibes. Let's talk about that in segment number 3. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are your free and streaming Rockies podcast on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Hey, your subscription to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, best way to help the show. Really, really do appreciate it. And thank you for making us your first listen of the day. So we're all anxiously waiting for the news about Todd Helton, and unfortunately Matt Holliday not getting a lot of recognition there as well. But I wanted to read a little bit from Renee Descartes' piece from yesterday, Todd Helton and the Just Vibes Hall of Fame voting process here on Purple Row. And the first part goes through and it really dives into everything. But I wanted to these comments, after breaking down all of the narratives, all the stuff, they just really stood out to me here from Renee, and I wanted to read some of it as well. All right. My focus is on Helton because he's the Okay, yeah. My focus is on Helton because he's the player I know best of those on the ballot. But he's also one example of a larger problem in the Hall of Fame voting process. A lack of clear methodology and explanation on the part of some, emphasized there in the piece, baseball writers, BBWAA members. These voters are, after all, selecting those who will be inducted into one of the most elite institutions of sports. For sports writers to explain their thinking seems like a reasonable expectation on the part of fans. This then raises a questions of consistency again. Consider what's known so far about Helton votes as an illustration. Renee goes into to dive into the comments given by Will Graves, Tony Maserati, Bill Ballard, and John Heyman about the Rocky, about their thoughts on not selecting Todd Helton, and they really just kind of just range. He's just like, There's he's a great player. He couldn't just get there. There's no wow factor, and it's just so nitpicky from the reception of it that Renee was looking at here. But I want to go back to what she says after this. In other words, this feels like the kind of capriciousness that happens when the assignment is graded without a rubric. And it's a bad practice because it moves the focus away from the objective accomplishments of the players to the subjective opinions of the writers themselves. To be clear, none of this is to say that every writer should have the same criteria. The differences in the qualities writers value make for important discussions. But those criteria should be objective and their explanation transparent. And that's what I think is super tough. I just don't think that there hasn't, especially with the dropping of Todd Helton this year. Like, what? Like, it really is like, or some people not voting for people and missing that that's their last year of eligibility. Like, this is a really big deal. We treat it as a big deal. Well, I mean, mostly because it's a good off-season thing to keep the baseball conversations going. But this is a really, really tough Hall of Fame to get into, a very rigid one. And its history of getting in is very tough. And I just feel like the explanations from some have been lackluster. Because what I really liked going through, and Manny Randall he's a staunch Helton defender, always breaking down people arguments. He was actually going in the comments on Twitter when people would hit him with stuff that he was like, fair enough, good point. That stuff is the way to have this type of conversation. But it's just the way that it really has just come down to a lot of people unfamiliar with the body of work of Todd Helton. And I'm sorry, like, if you get the Hall of Fame vote, you need to do your due diligence. You need to do significant research. And they already know these players. They're baseball writers. They've been following the game. These baseball writers have forgotten more about baseball than I'll ever know. I'll own up to that. I'm fine with that. But it's just so many times it feels like players include, and this isn't just Todd Helton. Larry Walker went through the same thing. Every Rockies player is going to go through the same thing. But it just doesn't seem like the appropriate amount of due diligence and the appropriate amount of care and focus and attention are spent on each candidate. Because to just sit there and say there's no wow factor about Todd Helton, when you look at his numbers and you look at the advanced metrics and he's better than Hall of Famers, when he's considered to be one of the best hitters of all time, when he's one of the best doubles hitters of all time, when he's really overall one of the best first basemen to ever step on the field. And yeah, Homer hats on. It's right here. It says Colorado Rockies. I host a Rockies podcast. I got Rockies stuff over. I'm a Rockies homer. I get that. But I'm also a guy that understands the importance of the stat in the conversation of in sports. And for Todd Helton to consistently get knocked while also exceeding in statistical categories for them people on the road, it just really drives me nuts. And I know it. You can't pay attention to everybody in the modern game, especially baseball, right? You don't know everybody. Let's be real. How many people in the national media are really going to talk about the Rockies once the season starts? Nobody. They got their preview list. They got all the stuff, the prospects and blah, 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 blah. But the Rockies are already an afterthought. And this makes the journey to the Hall that much harder because you have that bias that is baked into a lot of people, including sports writers, that scoff at the Rockies and scoff at the greatness. And that's what frustrates me about this process. That's what will be really disappointing if Todd doesn't make it this year. It's because the people dropped him off his ballots, and there's really no reason why. And there hasn't been a great explanation as to why. I'm not impressed when I read your lackluster explanations of Todd Helton barely missing out on it, and because there's no wow factor or Coors Field or blah, blah, blah. It's a guy that for 17 years contributed at the highest level in one of the most highly contested and most lopsided times in baseball history in the steroid era, mixed in with good postseason numbers in his limited time there, good numbers on the road. I just am asking that. I just think that vote carries a lot of weight in the sports world, and a lot of the justifications behind Todd Helton and other players has felt inadequate to me. And I really think you really got to go read more from Renee Descartes' piece on Purple Row. Also highlights this very well, breaks it down, and really had me thinking. Remember, this is from Purple Row, Todd Helton and the Just Vibes Hall of Fame voting process. There's more than just vibes to vote on when it comes to the Hall of Fame. Folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. We're going to be back on Friday with a crossover episode with Locked On MLB Prospects. Don't miss out on that. Still got time when this episode posts. It's not going to be a lot of time, but you're still going to have time to get your your questions submitted. Let me know in the comments section below. Let me know on X, Twitter, LO Rockies. Let me know what your thoughts are, what you want to know about the farm system. Because, folks, this has been today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Or if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs got you covered there as well. Until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.